Welcome to Grammar Flips. Our video for today, we're going to review two things. Number one, we're going to review independent and subordinate clauses. And number two, we're going to review coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. So, the first thing, let's look at the independent clause. The independent clause has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone. This is your basic simple sentence. The man stood alone. It has a subject, it has a verb, it's a sentence. It needs nothing else. Very easy, very simple, independent clause. Then, we have our subordinate clause. Subordinate clause has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand by itself as a sentence. Because he was injured. We have a subject, we have a verb, but we wouldn't use this as a sentence all by itself because he was injured. However, if we combined it with an independent clause, then it would be a sentence. Because he was injured, the man could not stand without help. Notice the placement of the comma here, right after the subordinate clause. So, subject verb cannot stand by itself. Now, let's say you have two independent clauses that you want to put together because, let's face it, this is kind of boring. The man stood alone, he was lonely. Whoop-de-doo! But if we use a coordinating conjunction to combine the two independent clauses, then we have a much more interesting sentence. The man stood alone and he was lonely. Notice the placement of the comma. Anytime that we join two independent clauses together, we separate them with the comma and a coordinating conjunction. Okay, so let's look at another one. Kind of boring by itself. The man walked on crutches. He walked slowly. That's something an elementary student would probably write. Very simple, very straightforward, also not very interesting. But we can combine those with a coordinating conjunction and make it a much more interesting sentence. The man walked on crutches, so he walked very slowly. Notice our comma, notice our coordinating conjunction. Now, how do you know what your coordinating conjunctions are? We have a little acronym. You may have seen this before. This is the easiest way to remember all of your coordinating conjunctions. Fanboys, we have F for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So there are 7 coordinating conjunctions, and that's all that there are. So anytime that you see these words in a sentence, you might look to see if they are joining two independent clauses. Now let's talk about your subordinating conjunctions. Let's take this simple sentence, for example. This is an independent clause. The man walked very slowly. Well, we want to add some information to that to make it more interesting. The man walked very slowly while he was on crutches. So our subordinating conjunction combines this subordinate clause while he was on crutches, because this cannot stand alone by itself as a sentence. So we combine these two, and we know a little bit more about what's going on, and it's a lot more interesting. You could also take the same sentence with the same subordinating conjunction and subordinating clause and write it the opposite way. While he was on crutches, the man walked very slowly. Notice the placement of the comma here. Now there's no comma in this part because when your independent clause comes first, you do not need a comma to separate the two clauses. But when your subordinate clause comes first, while he was on crutches, comma, then this is where you would add your comma to separate it from the independent clause. Okay? Now, how do you know what your subordinating conjunctions are? Well, there are quite a few of subordinating conjunctions, and you don't really want to memorize them all because there are quite a few of them. But this is a little phrase that can help you learn most of them on a white bus. The O stands for only. Now that. After, although, and as. When, whenever, whether, where, wherever. How. If, in case, in order. That, though, even if, even though, ever since, because, before, unless, until, and since, and so that. Now you don't want to memorize all of these, but as you work with them, you will start to recognize when you are seeing a subordinating conjunction. So now let's look at some example sentences. Let's see if we can pick out the independent clauses, the subordinate clauses, and the conjunctions. The man walked slowly, yet he knew he had to keep trying. Well, first of all, I know that my sentence is in two parts because there's a comma right in the middle. And so that automatically points out to me that there are two parts of my sentence. So I have two different clauses here. The man walked slowly. That's an independent clause. So I know that that can stand on its own. But I don't know about this word here, yet. Yet he knew he had to keep trying. Well, he knew he had to keep trying is an independent clause by itself. And this word yet, if I remember my coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, the Y was yet. Yet he knew he had to keep trying. So I have an independent clause here and an independent clause here with a coordinating conjunction. Let's look at another one. His friends were at the party, but the man stayed home. His friends were at the party. It has a subject, it has a verb, it's a sentence all by itself. But the man stayed home. The man stayed, that's my subject and my verb. And this could be a sentence by itself. And I also know that the B in fanboys stands for but. So there is my coordinating conjunction connecting two independent clauses. Also notice the comma. Okay, let's look at a different kind of sentence. This one doesn't have any commas, so I don't know right off the bat what my clauses will be. The man decided to watch a movie at home since he couldn't go to the party. I do notice, however, that he couldn't go to the party could be a sentence by itself, but the since right here, that reminds me of my on a white bus, because since he couldn't go to the party cannot be a sentence all by itself. So I have a subordinating conjunction here with a subordinating clause. And the man decided to watch a movie at home is an independent clause. I also could turn this around and say since he couldn't go to the party, comma, the man decided to watch a movie at home. And that would be a dead giveaway that I have a subordinate clause and a subordinating conjunction. One more. While his friends were at the party, the man was lonely. I notice right away I have a comma, so I know I've got some clauses. While his friends were at the party. Well, that obviously cannot be a sentence on its own. There's my subordinating conjunction. The W in on a white bus, one of the ones anyway. And then the last part of this, the man was lonely, that's an independent clause. So this comma is separating my subordinate clause and my independent clause. And there's my subordinating conjunction. Okay, so that's grammar flips for today. We reviewed independent and subordinate clauses and coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. Okay, thanks for watching Grammar Flips.